The readings you did on language policy in France introduced some efforts to protect French, particularly from the influence of English. And I'd like to talk in a little bit more detail about some of those provisions, including the Toubon law that you read about. It's called the Toubon law because it was introduced by a legislator named Jacques Toubon. And as you'll see from the graphics here, I know this is in French, but a lot of the words are quite similar. In English, you'll see that the Toubon law requires the use of French in many aspects of public life that translate into the presence of French in most people's daily life. It includes provisions like the use of French in public spaces, including things like signage, in commercial context, so when doing shopping and conducting business, in advertisement and audiovisual media, which we'll look at in just a second. It also requires that French be used in providing public services. So things like if you get your driver's license renewed, that transaction is going to happen in French. If you are if you go to court or you're interacting with the justice system or the criminal justice system, all of those documents and those proceedings will be in French. It guarantees that French be used in work and workplaces and also in education. One of the most visible ways that the Toubon law and its provisions ensuring the use of French shows up is through the media. Of course, we all consume all sorts of media, shows, movies, songs, etc., internet, every day. And so if you turn on the TV in France, I know fewer and fewer of us are actually turning on a TV, but TV content must be available in French. French people really appreciate media from other countries and cultures and other languages, but a French language version, either through dubbing, where you hear the French instead of the original language, or subtitles on the screen, must be available. And more of us are accessing that content online. So for customers in France, streaming services like Netflix and others also have to offer French subtitles and or dubbing to customers. And to help them navigate the sites, menus and descriptions on those websites or in those apps must also be available in French. Turning to music, if you listen to French broadcast radio, and again, I know that fewer and fewer of us do that these days, but the Toubon law and related laws require that at least 35% of songs that you hear on a French radio station be in French. Again, French people really do appreciate music from other cultures, including American music, but the law says that 35% of those songs that you hear, at least on broadcast radio, have to be in French. Of course, for on-demand streaming services where you have the choice of what you listen to, those laws don't apply. Advertising is a really visible place where you see these governmental efforts to protect French show up. So the Toubon law also says that ads that use languages other than French have to include a French translation. So you'll see a little asterisk or symbol next to the English, usually English, and then a French translation is provided. And you see a lot of English and French advertisements, in part because English is seen as being, first of all, a very international language. It sort of adds a note of modernity and sophistication to advertising, advertisers believe. So you see a lot of, especially slogans, in advertising in France. And here's an example from what I expect is a pretty familiar product, Kit Kats. So you'll see the largest text in this ad says, have a break, have a Kit Kat, and then there's this little symbol here, and then the French translation is provided up here, un break, un Kit Kat. But what I find really ironic about this is that the French translation uses the English word un break. And so I hope what that shows you is that there are some French words, or excuse me, there are some English words that have become so ingrained in French that they're accepted as a French word, and un break is one of them. Some other words that you'll hear frequently are le weekend, the weekend, or le shopping, shopping. So there are a lot of French words that really have become part of the French language, despite these efforts to exclude them. Before we move on to some other efforts to protect French and in particular from the onslaught of English, I'd like to share a fun fact with you about the Toubon law. So Toubon is named for the legislator who introduced it back in 1994, Jacques Toubon, and his name sounds like tout bon, which means all good. Literally, the literal translation of tout bon is all good. And ironically, many people refer to the law using English. They refer to a law that's intended to promote French and reject English using the English words. So many French people will call the tout bon law, if they refer to it, they'll call it la loi all good. In addition to laws and government efforts, this week's reading also introduced you to an organization called l'Académie Française, or the French Academy. And while it is not part of the government, it is supported by the government. And it's also been around for a very, very long time. So this organization's mission is to protect and promote the French language. And one of the ways that they do that is through the publication of its dictionary. The latest edition was just published last year, and you see a picture of that here. The other image that you see shows 4 of the members of the Academy. The Academy was established in 1635, so it's been around a really long time. And again, to promote and protect French. And the members of the French Academy, there are 40 seats on the Academy. The members are appointed for life, and for that reason, those 40 people are called the 40 Immortals. And they will tell you that that doesn't refer to the fact that they themselves as human beings are immortal and live forever, but that their mission is to protect the immortality of the French language, meaning that they're trying to make the French language live forever and be vital forever. One thing you may be noticing in this picture is the way that these guys are dressed and where they are. So you'll see that they are dressed in a very formal way whenever they meet. They have these special outfits that they have to pay for that are quite expensive, and that include, you know, this kind of tuxedo look and embroidery, and in some cases medals that these people have earned. They're mostly writers and people who are involved in literature. And you'll see that they're standing in this really ornate, fancy library, which is part of the building. They have a dedicated building in Paris where they meet and do their work. You may also be noticing that these are not young men, and that they're men exclusively, and they are really reflective of the demographics of this organization. It has only ever admitted 5 women over its history since 1635. And currently there is only 1 person of color who is a member of the French Academy. And as a result, most French people, they know that the Academy exists, they know that it publishes a dictionary, but they don't really, they don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to what the Academy says. There's this idea that it is an elitist, and I think this picture sort of underscores that it's an elitist organization that doesn't necessarily represent the way people use language in their everyday lives. And that they're really kind of out of touch with the everyday person in France. And so some of what they do, they publish this dictionary, and when English words enter the French language, they usually will comment on them. Often, along with other organizations, they'll propose French alternatives to those words. But the irony is that even though this organization is tasked with protecting and promoting French and actively works against English influences in particular, that if you open this dictionary, you will find that there are a lot of words in it that are of English origin, including a couple of the really common ones I mentioned earlier, like le shopping and le weekend. You will find them in the Academy's dictionary. So despite being kind of the guardian of the French language, even the Academy has noted that they've realized that the French language cannot completely resist the intrusion or the invasion of English words. So, as you've learned, there are laws designed to protect the French language. There are organizations, governmental and otherwise, whose mission is to protect the French language, you might be wondering, like, what does the average French person think? As mentioned, people don't pay that close of attention to what the French Academy does, and they have varying attitudes about whether or not they're relevant in the 21st century. But I wanted to show you this meme that sums up one reaction to the fact that so many English words have entered French. You'll see this, the title is "The French Language in the 19th Century." And so in the 1800s, so two centuries before. And the translation here, this is very, very formal language. So the translation into English might be something like, might you promptly summarize your exchanges with the person in charge? I will thus verify if that enters into correlation with our interview. So it's a very formal way of speaking, contrasted with the French language in the 21st century, and I don't think you need to know much French to see all of the English words that are part of this, this same message, but in 21st century French. Tu peux me débriefer et ça ton call avec le manager, comme ça je check si ça match avec le meeting. So this is just a kind of a pop culture, a funny way to comment on the influence of French, or the influence of English in French, to acknowledge that it exists and to kind of make fun of its influence. But I will tell you that most French people, and if you're at all interested, I've included the URL of a video where people on the street in Paris are interviewed, first of all, about which English words they recognize that are commonly used in French, and then about their attitudes. And you'll see that there are varying attitudes. Some people think that, this kind of adoption of kind of mixing 50-50 French and English, that's not necessarily useful and it's confusing. But most people accept that there are words from other languages, especially English, that are now a part of French. They use them every day and they don't necessarily have a problem with it. So the average French person doesn't necessarily think a lot about protecting French from English as much as organizations like the French Academy and certain government organizations and legislators do.